Good morning. Happy Solstice Week, everyone. I'm coming on today to share a little bit about the fire element and how to connect with, align, and balance, be in balance, live a little more in balance. I think I'm going to light now a candle just to bring some fire here. Invite you in. Thank you, sweet fire. So many of you may have celebrated in your own way a solstice on Tuesday. For the Northern Hemisphere, the summer solstice ushers in the fire season. And as we've become kind of even more acutely aware over these last couple of years in where I live, the Pacific Northwest, the fire season or the fire as an elemental being can be both a powerful ally and a devastating force. We've had intense fires in the West Coast and Pacific Northwest for the last several years that are probably only going to intensify. So we're becoming much more familiar with that elemental being. So some of what I want to share today is about practicing honoring fire in all its forms. To have the skills, to nurture skills to at times cultivate more fire where more fire is needed, to at times soothe or ease or redirect the fire spirit when that's needed, and then to at times simply witness, to really kind of release to the transformative power of the fire spirit. I'll tell a little story. This just was happening just this week. One of my kind of go-to states of low-grade activation is irritability, and I did notice this week just a little spike in my irritability and kind of less tolerance for things that sort of get under my skin. And I've shared this already. I need a new computer, and it was going really slow this week. And there had been a number of relatively small things, but I could feel the rage just building. And finally, for whatever I was doing, it tipped the scale, and I felt like I could either throw my computer across the wall or I could sit and be with it. And in that moment, I had the presence of mind to sit and be with it, which I don't always do. But I could imagine this giant flame, just the frustration, the anger, the rage, this giant flame consuming me and just letting it fill the space, letting it really take me with it, and just practice breathing and crying and humming and letting the fire move through. I didn't feel 100% afterwards. I don't still quite feel 100% this week, but something in that moment did clear and reset enough that I could move on. So there's just a small example of that last piece of letting fire kind of do its thing. So let me get into just 5 ways, and this is a little more of a broad brush. So we won't get into like very specific practices, but more of a broad stroke on how to start to align, attune to, be observant to, and orient in a balanced way to the fire element. And the first I'll offer is just to start recognizing it as an elemental being, as a spirit that's dancing in both the outer world and inner ecology of our bodies, of our spiritual and psychic systems, as much as it is in the physical physical world, and to just acknowledge it like we would a friend. So in the outer world, fire shows up in perhaps more obvious ways of actual, the actual physical fire, sun, light, but also processes that have that metabolic element to it, like the metamorphosis in that takes a caterpillar to a butterfly, or photosynthesis, the process that transforms light into usable energy, or even the metabolic heat of compost breaking down. So that those processes are the sort of physical, invisible manifestation of the fire spirit. And in similarly in the inner world, it's the qualities are the same. You can think of any of those qualities that bring sort of light, warmth, heat, and metabolism. So in the inner world, that might look like the spark of creativity or insight, or the flame of passion, irritability, as I shared, anger, even righteous rage, or indirect, or any version of those emotions, as well as the quality that metabolizes or digests emotions, ideas, or physical food. So in the Ayurvedic tradition, the seat of health, and actually in many traditional medicinal frameworks, the seat of health is the digestion, is the digestive fire. Um, so that's, yeah, in that inner world or kind of personal world, that's where we can, just start to give a little hi, hello, and nurture a relationship through recognition, just like we would any other friend. So number two is to consider places where the fire element or the fire spirit may be absent or needing to be stoked or nurtured. And this might show up in anything that feels stuck, any place where there's like stagnation, or kind of an over accumulation. You can think of like the what does a forest that just before it erupts into a forest fire look like? It's like the buildup of uh, residue on the forest floor that sort of gives way or calls in that next sort of energy of clearing out. And so that same sort of mapping we might explore in our in more immediate ecology, or even our inner ecology, places where there's just an over accumulation of residue, emotional, physical, mental, karmic residue, where there's dullness or sluggishness, resignation. That's a quality I've kind of been playing with lately. And particularly as someone who's struggled with depression, the fire element is often brings a therapeutic sort of spark or energy or movement that at times can be hard to access in that more like heavy, stuck, downward oriented place. So in places where that fire is needing to be stoked more, the practices tend to be around calling in fire with movement, with warmth, with releasing, with getting kind of energy moving through friction, through creativity, through song. Movement of really any kind is a part of that. Can start to sort of stoke that fire. And then on the other side, we might consider, so number three is to consider where fire is a little bit more in overdrive, how it might be soothed or channeled differently. So my partner is more of a fire element driven person, and signs that fire might be a little in overdrive it are on the physical plane, things like inflammation, heartburn, rashes. If you tend to kind of get red, a little more red or rashy skin, um, that's like some of their more prominent physical symptoms. Um, and then in the world, we see this as reactive aggression. We see this as violence spilling out, um, as well as kind of the habit of um, addictive patterns, both substance addiction, but also like activity and workaholism, that the overextending oneself to the point of burnout. You can hear in the word the connection to that fire element. So we soothe fire, or we balance fire with kind of obvious counterpoints, slowing down, things with cooling qualities, calling in other elements like water and earth, that heavier, slower pace, like a mud bath is so soothing, in a kind of a spiritual or physical way to the fire element. You think of things that can dampen or slow down the movement of fire, and we can call in or nurture those things on any level. The fourth thing I'll share is to just consider where fire is doing its part in the ecology and needing to be witnessed, needing to just sort of play out its cycle. So you might be going through something that's really, really challenging, really intense. You might be kind of in the oven, as it were. And despite all of your efforts, it just seems to be on its own trajectory, in a way that you can't seem to really adjust or reroute. So the invitation I'll offer here is to just consider if it's possible to, and I know this is hard while we're in it, so it may not be accessible in the moment, maybe just in reflection or retrospect, but to hold this wider perspective that you might be in a metabolic process, you might be in a digestive or metamorphic process where transformation of some kind is happening. You're literally getting cooked, right? So even if you can't like feel grateful or appreciate this, and I am never an advocate for forcing those feelings if they don't naturally arise. The invitation is just to witness this as the movement of fire that will eventually evolve into something else that will eventually move through. Um, and yeah, can we just be the witness of that process? Transformation is the work of fire via the shifting of one state to another, right? Through heat, through friction, through effort. The mystics might describe this as ritual. The yogis might call it tapas, that effort of spiritual labor. So yeah, that's there is some labor. Yeah, there is some effort in even just sort of holding that wider view when we're in the fire. Um, so kind of hold that one lightly. And then the last thing I'll offer is to practice entering, when possible, to practice entering into conscious ritual with fire. With all of these in mind, is there a way to dance with the fire in the form of ritual, movement, creativity that can support the momentum, that can support or participate, where you can participate with the flow and movement and the transformation of the fire spirit um, in that shape. And by ritual, I mean very simple. It could be very simple things like the thing I just described at the beginning, like just imagining the flames washing through and taking that whatever it needs to take with it. It can be lighting a candle and uh, moving or dancing or singing for a few minutes. Um, it doesn't have to be anything very fancy. But is there, yeah, a way to just create a little bit of a container for experiencing, communicating with, and being in participation with that fire element? And this is a particularly powerful and perhaps difficult when we are in those, periods of intensity or when we're in the oven, as it were. Um, but those are also the moments when it can be the most powerful to just really consciously turn towards that quality of heat, of warmth, of um, disintegration um, that is inevitably clearing a way towards something else, even if we don't know what that is just yet. So, yeah, with that, I'll just offer a simple thanks to the fire spirit of this season. May we, um, yeah, move in balance and in as much alignment with you as possible for the good of all creation. All right, thanks, folks. Oh, I want to say one more thing, which is I would love to hear if there were one or two pieces from what I shared about how fire shows up or how to tune into the fire element more. Any of those, any one or two really spoke to you or stood out to you, I'd love for you to share in the chat. Or if there is any other way that fire element is showing up for you um, that you want to explore or share, please share that in the chat. I'd love to hear what you're working with. Okay, cheers, folks.